Hi, noticers. It's Maggie and Orvi here again with an amazing guest, Krystopher Scott. I am so thoroughly excited to have you here, Krystopher. I can't say enough, but I'm about to say more.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So, just a little backstory. Krystopher and I met in our local community of Columbus, and I was wowed immediately. Just from everything you show up with, your energy, your passion, your intellect, your stories, and your courage, to be honest. And as I learned and we became friends more through our commitment to the arts and creativity, and we got to know each other more in that space, I was like, even more like, what is going on here? This is incredible. And so I'm excited to have you today to talk about what you've noticed along your journey and sort of your stories that have shaped how you are here in this world, creating and showing up courageously and bravely. So Krystopher, to that end, is a highly experienced, very true, highly experienced and visionary beyond any measure creative director. Krystopher brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise in empowering underrepresented communities and elevating minority voices across all industries. With over a decade of experience in entrepreneurship, filmmaking, and investing, he has developed a deep understanding of the power of storytelling to drive positive social change. And it's happening already. I want to add that. Krystopher's leadership and innovative approach to multimedia storytelling are exemplified through his founding of Atelier 411 Studios, a company dedicated to celebrating and preserving the richness of Black culture. And under his guidance and influence, Atelier 411 or 411. I didn't ask you how that's pronounced, so please correct me.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
Has become a beacon of hope, shining a light on the contributions of Black individuals, both past and present, while paving the way for future generations. His unwavering commitment to social justice and inclusion has made him a respected and influential leader in his field, and his passion for empowering marginalized communities and uplifting the voices of underrepresented individuals has also inspired countless others, me included, to join him on this important journey. As a creative director, Krystopher's unique perspective and creativity will undoubtedly help shape and transform the world of multimedia storytelling, and already has, driving positive change and making a lasting impact for generations to come. I invite you, Krystopher, to include anything else, because I know you have, even beyond that, have done so many incredible things. If I've missed anything or misrepresented anything, please feel free to add on.
I don't think anything was misrepresented. However, I will say that, when I first started, it was definitely, making sure there is a lens and preservation of Black culture. And, as I've, continued to evolve in this thing we call life, culture as a whole, and it's just us as humans. So it's about preserving culture as a whole, not just Black culture. That is definitely something that's prominent because that's what I am, for sure. But however, the preservation of humans and how we communicate and we commune with each other is important. But yes, that's all I was going to add. But other than that, it was a lot. It's the first time I've heard it read back to me. So.
I love it. I was sharing with Chris, I'm like, I have to just share it as it is, and I'll add some of my hopeful, energetic pizzazz to it. But it is important because it is really beautifully written and communicates just how you're moving through the world. So I appreciate that. And also, I love your evolution comment here, because I'm moved by you perceiving it, how important how we commune as humans is yes. To the conversation that you're even advancing.
Yes.
Okay. So to kick this off, there's so much I want us to kind of cover, and I know we can't cover it all, so maybe there'll be a part 2. But okay. We know, I would say I can see it very much seated here in our community that you are building a movement, and you've already done some of that work. And I want you to be able to speak to that. And there's other things about your transgender advocacy and increasing arts representation and advocacy, as well as this, what we just shared, kind of about preserving the art history and expression of underrepresented cultures. And all of that, even under, the power of storytelling or the fortitude of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
But first, I'm really curious, and we've had stories have come through, but how you would speak to this is, can you share what has shaped you? Like, what are some of those really critical moments of stories that are at the origins of your influence that have informed how you show up and create in the world today as you are, and sort of pick what you want to put out into the world?
That's a very loaded question. But I believe I can answer it. And it's very interesting. I'm not that old, but I'm not that young. I'll be 35 in August. But now I'm starting to think, oh wow, 35. I'm starting to do some like real reflecting. Uh and I'm saying, wow, you've lived, quite the life there so far. Going back to moments that shaped and kind of define the work that I do today, because my parents, my biological parents, they got married when they were very young, joined the military in their 20s, and ended up getting divorced. So I ended up spending my roughly about from one, so I would say about 6 or 7 years old, with my grandparents in Richmond, Virginia. So I would stay between my great grandparents and my grandparents. One thing about my biological parents is they grew up in the same church together. So the church that my parents grew up in, my mother and my father were both baptized in that church. My grandmother, it's one of the oldest churches in Virginia. It started out as a slave shack on Browns Island, 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church. And it was a community center. It wasn't just a church. Like, even to this day, my family, for the most part, every Friday we still feed. We have a Friday feeding. That's something we've just always given and been a part of in service. That's all I've known and all I've seen. My great grandparents, they were deacons and deaconesses. By that time they were definitely in their 70s. So they had like this baby in their 70s. And my great grandma, to this day, she just turned 99, Valentine's Day. She'll tell everybody like, hey, I'm the reason, you're the reason why I don't live in New York anymore. Parents decided to, when they divorced, my from Brooklyn, New York to Richmond, Virginia to help take care of me. So she has been living now, she reminds me, in Virginia for going on 35 years. But it's been interesting I was very fortunate to see that. And to me, that was just a way of life. Your great grandma putting clothes on the line, watching the news at 6 o'clock, watching I Love Lucy. I recognize it now in my adulthood that I had the opportunity to have a slow life. Oftentimes when you have young parents, that's not always the case. You're moving just as much as them. You wake up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're literally constantly going from the time you're literally born, in comparison to when you have parents, having been divorced now too, myself, I would prefer, if it's, in the cards for me to have more children, I want them to be able to have that slow life where I don't want to have to feel like, okay, I have to drop you off at daycare and have to do this and this and this. It does something completely different from a developmental standpoint. So being around older people at a very young age, it was different. The way that I learned how to read a lot sooner. My way I was able to communicate, because I was all around older adults, so I had no choice. I couldn't speak like a child. I learned my learned my numbers by playing solitaire. I learned how to play solitaire with my great grandma. My family, we had something to play. The Keno was like bingo and poker together. And that's another thing. We always got together as a family. Like, we had family reunions. I remember one of the last family reunions where just about everybody was still living at the time, because my great grandmother, she was one of 12. And it was one of the most beautiful family reunions I remember to this day. But to see everybody around and just giving and coming together, that's how I was always, raised. You bring food, and that's why you see me now. I try to do events where I bring people together. It comes from that. So those are kind of multiple events wrapped up in one. But I think that's also where the care comes from as well. I don't have I don't like ageism. Like, I can talk to
Mhm.
someone that's 93 years old. It doesn't matter what the age is. I could talk to anybody. And I look at it again, going back to one of my prior points I was saying, we were going through the bio. It's about the human experience. Like, you're not going to be young all your life. Eventually, you're going to get old. And I think people, forget about that as well. And even, speaking to a child, like, if you don't know how to talk to a child, you don't remember when you were a child?
Yeah.
Think about that. How did I feel when I was a child, when I would want individuals to interact with me? It's not hard for me to stop, and when one of if at the time, my kids needed my attention, or even my nieces or nephews now, I can stop and give them their attention, because I remember, like, hey, I just want to show you want to be involved in the conversation. And again, taking away the fact that they're that child is just a human that wants to interact and wanting to commune. So I hope that was those are some times, some moments that kind of uh shaped who I am. Yeah, I think that's those are some moments. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure
no,
we'll get
that's
into others.
yeah. I'm in awe, Maggie. I feel like you probably have a question. I'm like just soaking. I could just listen to
I
you
wish you
speak
could
about
see.
this.
I know. I wish you could see my face because I'm like glued to the screen right now, listening to your story. It was such a beautiful reflection, and you painted such a beautiful picture. And I loved your comment of a slow life, because that's kind of what I was feeling peace just hearing you talk about this. I was like, that sounds so peaceful, and it just sounds like the community aspect is such a lost to me, because I grew up with nothing like that. I didn't grow up with a community aspect or a gathering space. I have a lot of siblings, but the community, it's something that's becoming very apparent to me how important that is to humanity. So to exactly what you're speaking about, to preserving humanity, and it's lost, I think, for a lot of us right now. So that is really beautiful that you had that and you're cultivating that now. Yeah, I really love it. And there's so much that you said that I want to dig into. I'm always curious about the church because I grew up Catholic, and
We can get
yeah,
into that too. There's
I think
I'm
layers
like,
to that.
I'm like, do
I
we
know
go
there's a
there?
story there.
Yeah, I'm like, do we go there, or where else do we go? But if it's, I'm curious about the church. So that would be my question. But Orby, if you wanted to go in a different direction, you can ask away.
I, Christopher, you just like opened it so far wide, which in an awesome way. There's like so
Ooh.
many places we can visit, and I'm fine if I know I've heard a little bit about Christopher's reflection on your church experience beyond just the community. Your, I mean, navigating that and transmuting that differently for yourself. So, like, I'm happy to have that conversation and would love to hear that from you guys back and forth too. And I can always insert.
It's very interesting because without us saying we're going chronologically, we're going chronologically. Because there was a big disruption. Now, before we get into the church aspect, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about death. I tell people, I am a friend of death. We can't have life without death. And growing up in a large family, in an older family, I've had a lot of family members that have passed.
Yeah.
Some have passed suddenly. Some people, I've taken care of as a, that's slowly. My grandfather had ALS, and that's a completely different situation to watch someone that took care of you to then you're taking care of him. Unfortunately, my uncle, he was, unfortunately murdered, and during time when Richmond was one of the most dangerous cities, in the United States, so you're seeing these things at a very early age, you're understanding what's happening. You're 6 and 7, you're getting it. You can, your family around you, we're all, again, you get older, you reflect. That's why they say hindsight is 2020.
Mm-hmm.
It's made it so much easier to forgive other individuals for maybe how they treated me at that time. Because I'm thinking about, you were that age trying to process that. We're all trying to deal with that at the same time. My grandmother lost her son while she's dealing with her husband who's dying at the same time, and her mother has dementia, and she's still working for social services until she can retire. Like, and I'm watching her do that and still be there for her grandchildren and still do everything she does at church. And I'm watching these things happen in real time. So going back to my mother, was my biological mother. She was stationed back in Virginia. That's when I went to go live with her. Fortunately, she got connected with a church cult. Now, my parents, they originally grew up Baptist. And this particular church cult, it's a Pentecostal holiness church cult. And the irony, it is based in Columbus, Ohio. That is how I have known Columbus since I was 7 years old. I remember when Stelzer was one road. I remember when the Renaissance was the Holiday Inn. I remember when Max Erman's used to be at Jeff Ruby's. So I remember when, East Mall, I remember, we had picnic with the Pops, and I told somebody, I was like, hey, this used to be a mall, right? I used to get Chinese food right there. I used to be FYE, we're at City Center. So it's like seeing these things. And my stepfather, he is originally from Indianapolis. So I've been coming up to the Midwest, for quite some time. And it's funny how life will bring you back to certain places. Now, I will say I did want to go to the Ohio State University. I got accepted on deferred enrollment for the winter semester. So that's how, again, I'm not that old, but I'm not that young. So, so the church situation was very interesting because I knew that I was always much so led by something that was higher than me, even at an early age. And all of my family knew that as well. And I knew, at the time, the Baptist church, you say that I told my great grandfather, I said, Papa, I want to give my life to the Lord. He's like, all right. So he gave me a little Bible, they give you the soldier's Bible, it's a New Testament, it has Psalms and Proverbs. And at the time I was actually going to a Christian school as well. So he told me to read, Romans 10 and 9 and, until I believe it. And I was sitting there every day. I was sitting there, reading it, time I wake up and time I go to sleep. Now this is a 6-year-old. And I'm doing this, taking a step back. My grandmother was here. She would say, hey, you missed the part when I always had my own business. I couldn't read, but I knew how to somehow work a computer. My grandparents had this old Commander computer, like the old school one where you had the floppy disk, and I would have papers and could barely write, couldn't write anybody's name, but I was writing stuff down. But the name of my business was Room Service. I had a whole thing. I worked for this guy named Joel Bieber. It was a law firm. I'm telling you, I was always, this is something that's just always been in me. It's just, I can't, it's not something I can't teach, because I don't know. I can't teach someone how I got to be this way, because I'm just like, hey, I don't know. Like, I come from my grandfather was a musician. Like he was a singer, musician. I could play 5 different instruments. He was also a videographer. He was a photographer. So there's a lot of things that are just genetics. And I'm like, hey, look, this is just the sauce that's in me. I can't, So I digress, going back to the church thing. So taking that into consideration. Now, this is who I was before into the church. Now, talking about a church cult. When they recognized the talent that I had, and, that, I was very good, at music. The first time I ever preached in a pulpit, I was 7 years old. Wow. But I was getting up in front of pulpits before then. I 6 years old, at the Baptist church, my grandparents' church, you greet the visitors. And then, there was one point I was the MC, of the entire, service. And at the time, the pastor, Reverend Johnny Johnson, me and him had the same birthday. And so did my uncle that passed. So it was interesting. He just saw that in me, and he tried to, nurture that. So then and what I'm used to, I'm trusting that, hey, these people love me and they're nurturing. So I get into this new organization in church, and they are not the same. It's a different story. And, my mother was, my biological parents and myself were 20 years apart. So, she's still growing. She's in the military. She's still trying to figure it out. She's remarried. And, again, it's easier. And I try to tell everybody, you got to get to the point where you got to forgive your parents, because you got to think about it. Remove the fact that they're the title of your parent. They're a human being. They're trying to figure it out like you.
Right.
And you're more inclined to probably, think about it when you become a kid, when you got kids yourself, and the first time your kids say something, they hurt your feelings, and you got to turn your head and cry. But then you think about it like, man, was I a mean kid? Like, and then it's even like a sibling. Like, to be hard on your sibling, like, oh, you don't know how to be a good sister or brother. Like, I was just born into this. I didn't ask to be this. That by birth, I'm this. I'm trying
Yeah.
to learn. It's that's that grace, that we tend to not have with each other. But that grace has to start within ourselves first. Digressing again, going back to the church thing.
It's all good.
So yeah, the church. I knew that I wanted to still serve. Like, services has always been a part of it. And I was like, this is the ways in which I could do it. I was a youth trustee. I wrote plays. I taught many musicians how to play instruments. My mother was a church president. My stepfather, he did audio visual. So everything that you could do in a church, we did it. At one point in time, I built a church. I built churches with my hands. And this was all before the age of 18. I helped to fundraise, writing letters to Whirlpool and GE, asking them would they have tea on us, saying that we're raising funds for this, help people to raise funds to go to different mission trips. So doing all these things, it's interesting. I didn't know at the time that it was going to prepare me as an adult in what I'm doing now. But it was definitely very, very difficult in that space, because even the idea of in the organization, they had jurisdictions, and it was like one jurisdiction didn't want to be around another jurisdiction. Like, what are we doing? We're all one church organization. Why does there always have to be some form of hierarchy? And I was always that individual was trying to bring, there should not be a difference. We should bring people together. The thing, the moment where it really just broke off and everybody was just like, oh, something, it didn't, I'll say that's when I would say the hate started. They started this program for ninth graders. Starting in ninth grade, it was kind of to direct you and mentor you up and to get you into college, etc. And they had asked us to write a letter as to how our net worth would contribute to the organization. And, I was just like, just being myself. I just wrote something down, and my mom was like, hey, you need to fill this out. Like, it's the deadline. So I'm like, all right. So I wrote it, turned it in, didn't think anything of it, because I don't never win anything. And so then we're sitting there, during the meeting, these church conferences. When I'm telling you I was in church just about every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then these church conferences were like a week long. Like, it was those things. Now, mind you, I'm still identifying as female, and that's a whole nother level. You got a female that's, 8 years old playing a bass guitar better than grown men. So you can imagine, hey, I can hear music and I could play it, So at a very young age, I was very aware when people don't like you just because you're being yourself, because of something they have internally. But to me, I wasn't understanding it. Like, I just like playing. Like, I don't understand why you don't like me. Like, I'm not, I like it's, and I would give, and, so going back to, I was, jump backwards or jump forward. I was talking about, so the reason
the
I was
letter.
saying,
Yeah. The letter you wrote. Yeah. Or the essay you wrote.
I'm half asleep. It's like 9:00 in the morning. They go through, give out all the awards. So they're like, we want to read this particular essay because it was just so amazing. And so I'm just like, oh, somebody wrote something. And then they started reading it, and I just put my head down. And I put my head down because I already had experienced a lot of hate, because was pulling out a musician. I was just like, it just made me feel like an even bigger target. And I didn't want to be even bigger target. So, the church organization, there was different jurisdictions that was set up, across the United States as well as around the world. Because we have these jurisdictional meetings, I said that we should build our own hotels, and then we should have it so that it's like a timeshare. So individuals, because families were spending, all their money to stay at a hotel for a week for these conventions, and, and they're trying to, eat, by us creating the hotel wherever there was the jurisdictional headquarters church, that was creating both a property as well as jobs, as well as allowing people, even when they weren't wasn't a church meeting, they cannot go and then travel and just have it, as a timeshare. And that was my way of contributing. And so that's what they read. And before people said who it was, I was just watching grown people like, oh, that would never happen. Then I was like, oh, someone's like, that would really happen. It's like, and so to see it, I was like, oh, you a hater, because it could happen. And then me even telling you this, it's not far-fetched. But I'm in 8th grade. So what, I'm 14, 15 years old at this time. Yeah. So yeah. And then from then and then I was speaking French. I applied to Harvard when I was 13, so it was like all these things. And then, people wanted to take me under their wing, but I thought it was taking me under their wing. No, what it was is that they wanted to kind of mold me in what they wanted me to be.
Mm.
And that was never going to work because I know that I'm here for a purpose, and it's not for the purpose that you want me to be here for. Now, if the purpose that I'm here for, aligns at the time, then yes, but you're not going to control. And I've watched people that are in organizations. It was beneficial for me to see what people use when they manipulate people's emotions. And I'm very wary of people that are like, that's why this influencer age and this social media things is very, very interesting. People just say so many things. You have to be careful what you say. You will be held accountable for what you say and how you tell people when you're guiding people. And so people that are just so quick to just, I want to get up and speak and get up. It's why. Yeah. What do you really have to give and to offer? And are you going to give life? Or is it just about you and whatever, goal or, whatever thing you have going on? So what's the real reason behind the intention behind it? But anywho, so that's a little bit diving into the church. So then, the church, there was a situation, with, at the time. So I went down to Florida at the time. I graduated from Virginia high school, but my mother's residency was still in Florida. So I didn't qualify for in-state tuition in the state of Virginia the first year. So my father and my stepmom, they were living in Navarre, from the Panhandle. So it's close to Pensacola. They were stationed at Herpert Field, and I was born at Eglin Air Force Base. So I was just like, hey, why not go to Florida and qualify for in-state tuition? So I went down there, still part of the church organization. My roommate at the time, again, she was jealous of me. She went in my email, changed a letter that I had wrote to a young lady at the time in the church to make it seem like we were having a sexual relationship. We were not. She sent it out to everybody in the church organization. My biological mother didn't believe me. Everybody, that destroyed not only the relationship, what little I had left with my mother, that also affected my entire family, my extended family, because they saw how much my mother kicked me out of the house. It was so many things. That I would say from the time of 18 to 26 was the most tumultuous. From dealing with that situation, with her, as well as I was on the cover of a magazine for my business plan at a sneaker boutique at the time, and then I was also on the cover of it was like one of those magazines that shows your mugshot. I had I had a warrant out, and I didn't know for my license. What I did was one of those things, and then it just turned into where I was actually being harassed by the cops because I had beat the sheriff's daughter. And I didn't know I was being harassed as much as I was. And then I got to the point where I had been in total falsely arrested 9 times. Wow. I could tell people, and this is before I transitioned. This is as a Black woman. The time, and I'm just talking now. I'm sorry. Please feel free to stop me at any point too.
No. I will. Well, I guess I will.
Go ahead.
I want to keep going, and then I also want to pull out just some nuggets that is causing insight for me, which I think is really beneficial to share, which is, one thing that was interesting to me, because you were speaking about how you had this inane talent, guiding disposition towards who you were from a very early age. And I put it that way because it's I kept saying, I wrote a few words down that kept coming up as you were speaking. I'm like, okay, right. I loved the opportunity to live a slow life when you started. And then I thought about what you shared in terms of community and the social fabric that was woven for you, that was essential to creating a platform for exposure. All of the experiences you were sharing pre your teen years really were also this element of exposure in the way where you were speaking to all these adults that were different, and you were learning all these different things because of all of these different talents and passions and intrinsic guiding stars of the people around you, right? How they were moving through the world. And I thought, how cool is that, just to think about one, when we are the social fabric for I mean, our community, our children, the generations, whatever it is, whoever you're surrounded by, you're part of their social fabric, you know? And I think a lot about social fabric for children, because
Yes.
those who are falling through the cracks, quote unquote, are really those who don't have that net, right? And I think so critically about that for my children today, but also like those that I get to come into, you know, even temporary influence around. Like you said, it's like you could just talk to children as you can just talk to them. You don't, there's nothing you really need. They're just there for like, they're curious, and not, they're not just curious to like draw and color, but they're curious about like how you see the world. And the more exposure they have, which I see in you and your experiences, like the more they can find their own way almost, because they're like, well, this is who I am. And I really haven't seen that in a lot of people, Krystopher. Like, I don't see that depth of reflection, but also just like owning that, right? Even speaking to your comment about the grace to understand your parents and the forgiveness. And like that sits really intimately with me, because I have always had that reflection similar as well, because I was an immigrant. My parents were an immigrant. And one of the things I always say is like, my parents were extremely like, you know, they cared for me deeply. They even came here for the opportunity for their, you know, daughters, and for just the potential of life that they could lead. And yet they didn't know this culture well. So they had to grow up alongside of us growing up. And there's a lot in our culture where it's like you want to blame. And it's like, I never blame my parents for that, because where does that live? Like, why would I blame them for not
Exactly.
knowing something that I also don't know their experience growing up, because I didn't have to grow up the way they did. Right. And so it's like, there's so much grace, and that really sits with me. And I'm thinking about, oh my goodness, it's like, you're also expressing like, there's something I just keep seeing, creativity equals courage. Like, I don't know why that just keeps coming up for me. Like, I'm just saying, like, you know, you were just showing how you were letting your creativity flow, the creativity of ideas, the creativity of your music, the creativity of entrepreneurialism, you know, like you were just like a creative entity who was like, I just have
Well, I would
ideas.
it's creativity, but it's also being oneself. And I was reflecting
Yes.
on how
Hmm.
threatened people were by your self expression. And I'm also in awe of your integrity, because I'm like similar to you. I'm not old, but not young. I'm 36, so I'm a year older than you. But I've definitely cowered to authority. And I feel like I'm only now in my 30s finding my own voice and my own agency with these structures that we exist within. So I'm
Hmm.
inspired by your history of integrity, but it's how challenging our society makes that for an individual. Like you're saying,
That's what it is.
yeah.
It shouldn't be.
And it shouldn't be. And why is that? And also the structures, you mentioned the structure of the church, which was the hierarchies that people feel they have to create to assert some form of order, power, control, and how to dismantle that. But it sounds, and I guess you were talking when we paused, you were going through kind of the tumultuous times you were facing. And I guess I would love to, I was like, I wanted to keep listening. I do want to go back to that point, because, what was that like for you when you kind of knew? You were saying like from what I was hearing, like I always knew myself and I was just trying to be myself. And then I hit this point, like I would want to call it like a dark night of the soul moment, but you hit this point, and what got you through that? And what, even during that time, were you still able to have that forgiveness and love in your heart? Or did you go through this period of having to learn forgiveness? Did you go through this period of having to, like, could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And it's dark nights of
Yeah.
the soul. It doesn't, it was not just one time,
Mm.
especially when, you're trying to deal with the shadow self. That's important, in having to face it. Because it's, I guess, understanding that, again, going back to like life and death, you're gonna have to face it sooner or later. So
Yeah.
either you face it on your terms, or you're going to face it when you may feel that it's inconvenient for you. I tell people, off the time, depending on, whatever you feel like your higher being is, or higher thing, your higher being may be saying, hey, these things, circumstances, people are not good for you. And, or your body is trying to let you know, like, hey, you don't feel safe, but you keep trying to put yourself in that position. Now, when you're being guided or you're understood by that, it'll be okay. I'm going to have to move you and remove this for your safety. And then that's when it's uncomfortable, because you had the chance to get rid of it on your terms, but you didn't want to get rid of it on your terms. So now it has to be forced away from you, But then once you get more distance and space between that thing, you do realize that, okay, actually, you know what? This is actually for my betterment. It hurt a little bit, but it was going to be more detrimental than what that was. And that has been one of the most painful and difficult lessons to continue to learn in life. That some people say everybody can't go with you. It's the same thing,
Yes.
Especially when you're growing, and it's, you want people to experience, liberation, and what this looks like on the other side. But it's going back to, we fear what we don't know until we are able to get past of no longer fearing the unknown. And it's the attachments that we have, or expectations. Like, even like right now, I'm sitting in like my office. What I thought my office was going to be for production company, it looked completely different than what it is now. And I was in my apartment for about 5 years, and then even in this 6 months, even in this, from the time y'all emailed me to now, so many things have just changed. But I have become more familiar with this. That's the thing that is the most constant. And I'm like, okay, is it changing, or let me just allow it to let it evolve and grow into what it's supposed to be? And so now I'm like, try to run towards, like, okay, hey, what's this? I wonder what's over here. It's like a friend used the example of a child. When a child's first learning how to like walk, they're not scared because they're gonna fall. They're gonna continue to get up and every single time. It's not an idea of failure. And so, that's another thing that has been, I've also realized, okay, hey, if this is not going this direction, it's been easy for me to detach. Now, therapists may say that may have been because of my parents in childhood and the way I was detached from them and stuff like that. So I learned detachment very easily. That may be the case as well. However, I have grown to have a very healthy, relationship with, like, hey, it's time to let this go. Like, it's the next stage, and it's okay. It's just certain chapters, in the Bible, there's Ecclesiastes, it's everything, there is a season. And, sometimes there's going to be a season of crying. There's going to be a season of happiness. That's the ebb and flow of life. It's just, that's why I don't believe in finding balance. I believe in learning how to ground yourself. Because if you know how to ground yourself, you'll be fine. Because life could be crazy. Life is gonna always go, and the more stuff you add to it, it's just gonna. So if you're just trying to, like, and I think we've allowed people to sell us entrepreneurship. We've allowed people to sell love. We've allowed people to sell wellness, like, and things that are just rudimentally that are involved in our ancestry. A lot of us, like, and just even being able, and going back to not being able to talk to your parents because they weren't able to talk to their parents. This is important for history and oral history. Like, I try now to go more so and talk to my parents because there are things that I'm missing that they probably tools that I can use. That's why being able to talk to my great grandma, like, I call my great grandma, I'm like, Nana, so and so and so and so and so. She'll be like, yeah, such. But I realized, because people talk to a 99-year-old person.
Right.
Do you know how much life that woman has experienced?
Right.
And I don't, why are we so quick to go to the Googles or go to the encyclopedia, and we got a walking one right in front of us?
Yeah. Well, I think there's obviously our society is extremely ageist. And, I think we just forget that. And I think I have my biggest thing in this season, I don't know how long this season is or is going to last, but has truly been to, like, find friends or make friends authentically with integrity that are of all ages. Like, I'm like, I care to know like the pop culture that I can't grasp on, that the 20-year-old can get it now, or I want to know what, like, tweens have going on in their head. But I also really care to know the learned wisdom through experience of like a 75-year-old or like a 90-year-old. Like, I don't have a 90-year-old friend. I would love it if your grandma wants to like chat with me. I would.
I got a couple here in Columbus. I tell people I
I
feel
would.
like I'm the coolest cat because like I got older people that think I'm cool. My friends' kids of all ages think I'm cool. They don't even like hang
Yeah.
out with them.
Yeah,
So I'm like,
Christopher.
I'm
I mean,
cool
like,
with
you
my
are the
friends.
definition of the cool, because you're also just like free to be yourself. You're liberated in that way. So like you
And
are.
I want that for
That's why it's easy to
everybody.
get along. I do too. Believe you me.
I was
I
telling that
think.
for my friend. Your sons when they see me hanging out, they just like they think you are the cool mom. Like, why don't you act like that around us? Like, just be yourself. Like it
Yes.
doesn't. They're not
Yeah.
gonna. We think. I still respect. I love being around my parents. I love hanging out with my parents. Like I think they're cool. Like but they also have never like lied to me. Like they just been themselves. Like I've seen them at their most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Like and that's another thing. Having young parents and then growing up with them, you just see things differently. But it's also been beautiful to just watch their marriage. I'm talking about my father and my stepmom. Like watch their marriage just evolve, and then watch how they are with my sisters, and then seeing them get to be the parents that they've always wanted to be. Like the military takes so much from you. You can't really be present and in all those things. We don't think about that. And I think about the things that they were able to sacrifice. Yeah, I'm the first kid, they say it's the guinea pig, but I appreciate it so that my sisters be able to have, they both in present, and as much as they need. If eventually I decide for the whole grandparent thing for them, hey, they're gonna make some great, cool grandparents, like, but
Yeah.
right now, but even then, like, where it's, I appreciate I appreciate them a lot. I really do appreciate my parents. It's funny. I had sent them a text. It's funny you mentioned that you were working on in this season, making sure you had intentional connections, intentional friendships.
Mm-hmm.
Same. And then I also had to say, hey, look, it's cool. We're just friendly associates, and that's fine. We're not friends. That's okay. And that's and it's who I'm pouring into, and vice versa. But I'm also going back to nurturing. Nurturing is very important to me because I was nurtured at an early age. And and I asked my parents, I was like, hey, I just want to know, is there anything that I can do to like be a better son?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to check in, like, and to me, I don't think there's anything wrong with checking in. I think you should check in with any relationship, friendship, partnership. We get complacent and we're thinking, everything is good. If we're still evolving and constantly changing, our needs change, and so it's just like, hey, like, this going on, is there anything else that I could, better be present for you? Is there anything you need from me? I think that's something that should be done. And their response to me, theirs, I appreciate the response. It was like my dad said, like, I guess I can read it. I don't mind reading it. And I guess I'm reading this because my biggest thing when I told my parents I was going to transition was my father was concerned about my safety the most.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want me to be by myself.
Yeah.
And the importance of me having my birthday at the museum is that I wanted my parents to see all the people that have been surrounding me with love these past years. And I wanted them to see them actually see, put a face, to the pictures they've seen. And, my mom told me that on the way home, my dad was, he was crying a little bit. He was just like, he's like, I'm glad to know that, Chris is like safe and loved. And I feel so much better. So yeah, we're a big sappy family like that. So my dad said, for me, just continue trying to be your best self for yourself. My mom said, you're a great son and you do show up for us, entire family. So like your dad said, continue to be your best self. They didn't ask me for no money. They didn't ask me. I mean, not they know I ain't got no money, but still, like, it just, and then I tell, like, I try to just show up because I know the power and the value of just being present. People we take for granted so much, being present, taking the moment just to stop and have that like 5-minute conversation. it's, you don't know how much it could just change in individuals. Like
Mhm.
I'm probably in tune to a fault. I had a friend call me the other day, and as soon as he said, "Hey," I could hear it in his voice. I stopped everything. I was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "What
Yeah.
you doing? Need me to come by?" You
Yeah.
know, so it's, and I just want us to be more present and be more, you know, instead of trying to amass all these things, just work on, you know, quality time,
Mhm.
you
You
know, not just quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're so showing, like, even just your interaction with your parents right there. I was like, one of the things that I am thinking about always, like, lately, and just, like, also just reconditioning myself around, unlearning and more becoming, where it's, like, around what this notion of conditional love is, like, right? Like, what and
Mhm.
unconditional love is. And one of the things that I kind of, for a long time, was struggling with was, like, am I incapable of unconditional love? Like, Maggie's heard me say, like, I don't feel like I'm thoughtful. But when I say that, and I've heard now and I understand it differently, is that actually, like, I am one of the most, people have shared, I'm one of the most thoughtful people. And it's because it's actually unconditional, because there's not, like, I don't check in for a particular reason. I just check in. I said, I'm thinking of you. I wanted to say
Yes.
hello. Right. And to
Yes.
me, that comes so easy. Like, I don't think about it, but I think about all these people who've done grand gestures for me. So I, like, or do grand, not, and it doesn't even have to be grand, but, like, who do these gestures that don't feel the way that I express. So think about it, for, like, decades now, I've been thinking, well, you're not really, like, a thoughtful person, and you don't really know what unconditional, like, love or gratitude, like, kind of looks like. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's just because I was expressing it effortlessly to me. Like, the way that it, like, moves through me
Mhm.
with ease is actually profoundly more valuable than me trying to do it differently. And you just checking in was, like, that was an example of that, where you're like, I'm doing that. I'm going to check in with all my ships. But, like, I'm like, how many people send their parents that text, or, like,
No,
their
nobody sends.
caregivers, right? Or anyone. Like, no
Nobody.
one says, like, how can I be better for you? You know?
I
Well,
mean, it may be age too. Like, I'm just getting older. Like, you know, my grandmother, you know, she's getting dementia. I just think, like, okay, these people took care of me. Like, you know, and again, like, I just need to care. I'm just tired of us being at odds with everybody. I'm tired of, you know, this person not liking this person, this side against this side. That's not helping anybody. Like, it
yeah.
doesn't do anything. We're all human, and it's just like, some people just need a hug. Like, hey, you need a hug, and they don't know how. Some people don't know how to say that they need a hug. Like, and
Yes.
you don't know how to express. We know how to say, you know, the material things that we want, but the simple things that we need is something just like, hey, I need a hug. I need someone to say it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I have a question for you,
Yes.
Christopher. Have you considered being a pastor?
So, you know, I did grow up in church, and I was a minister at one point in time, and I've
Were you?
preached several sermons, multiple places, all over the place. I do not feel that I would ever be a pastor in the traditional form.
Mhm.
I have
Yeah.
since definitely converted to Islam, which is even funnier. I say that because I was preparing for Ramadan. Because it's funny because they'll be like, "Hey,
Yes.
if you're Christopher, you know, my middle name is Nasir, which in Arabic means one who gives help." And
Mm.
they'll say, "Yeah, brother, but you definitely you speak like a preacher." But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. It's always been that way, and I definitely have always you know, whether intentionally or not, even talking about history. I remember helping my grandma pack lunches for my father and my uncle and my godfather, my grandfather, and they went up to the Million Man March. Like, this is
Mhm.
people that are people watching on documentaries. I've been living history.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, so going back to it, I'm going back to Malcolm X. I've always aligned with like Malcolm X. And once, you know, Malcolm X, you know, did his Hajj, and he saw that there was, you know, there were individuals that were Muslim, that were white, black, all hues. He realized, like, no, the way in which we are trying to give something is not what it's for. And even on this platform, I will say, I learned Islam from my Palestinian friends.
Mm.
They told me that Allah was love. and that I was deserving. When I told them that I wanted to transition, I was like, I'm going to hell anyways. That's what the Bible says anyways. So why should I even try? And he's like, we don't believe that in Islam. They were the one that taught me that Allah was well. They told me the ones that taught me that I'm valued and I'm worth it. They made sure I ate. Like, they welcomed me into their home. Like, so it's, it's a thing. It's this division, whatever. We just need to care for each other more. We need to care for each other more and not be so, don't allow, because society has always operated, and that old guard is diminishing. This whole, we need these boxes and stuff like in labels in order to function, because we don't know how to function without. Nobody cares about that. Like, just what do you like to do? Oh, that's cool. Like, that's great. That's fun. That's cool. I don't care about all the other stuff. All the extra stuff, that's your business. Like, it's not going to change how I treat you. And that's what it is. It's like, oh, if you have these boxes, then I'm supposed to treat you this way. No, just love people. Just love people.
Where's the love?
Just love them.
Yeah. And I think it's like,
I'm sorry,
Maggie.
No, as you're speaking, I'm just like, the wisdom.
You're moved by it. Yeah.
I'm super moved by what you're saying, and it's not the words; it's that you embody it as well. Like, the first thing that came to mind when you joined this when we got on this call, I was like, presence. I was like, I could feel how present you were, because I think so few people are that way. And so I was immediately like, I was just like, present. Wow. Like, he's so present. And that to me alone shows love, right? It's like, I am here and I am giving you my full attention. Like, that's a form of unconditional love to me. It's like, you're just showing up and like, you're here fully. And that, I appreciate that so much. And so thank you for that. But I'd also, it's a feeling, and I was like,
I know that made me, I needed to hear that one. I needed to hear that one.
Yeah. But I just think there's so much value in all that you're sharing. So that's why I was just thinking that. I was like, I feel like I'm at church. I don't identify with the Catholic Church. I'm coming around to like new spirituality, more of like a yogi these days, but God is love. Like, I used to not be able to even hear the word God, but yeah, Allah is love, God is love, whatever you want to call it. It's just love.
Lean into spirituality. There's a difference between religion and spirituality, and I tell people that. To me, religion has become more of the capitalistic version of what that is, especially having gone to Cuba last year. And, spirituality, it's lean into it.
I was interested in having a conversation with UNCUT the other day, my husband, and I was like, because he was like, we were talking about someone specifically, and I said, well, it's like there's spirituality and there's religion, right? And religion is just the indoctrination of spirituality, whereas spirituality like belongs to all of us. But religion is just a way that it just wants to, it's like the next level down. Like, I don't mean to say that like God's not the next level, whatever, but it's like, it's just trying to, it's in the interpretation of man. Like, in all of our religions, religion became religion because it's an interpretation, and then it was indoctrinated, and then we follow, right? And I'm Hindu, and I, think that too. But like, the one thing that has always been incongruous with me from Western religion to Eastern religion is the focal point of, how we worship. And like, in Hinduism, we say like God is in all things. And so therefore you are in all things. And they're really like, from the origins of it, worship, we call, like, when you go to the temple and you worship in the temple to like a statue, an idol, we call it idol worship, because it's just for a moment of meditation to have an idol in front of you. But you can worship in a field alone, because the presence of God is everywhere, right? And so it's like, there's no focus on like, you have to go here to be able to be religious. Now, the indoctrination and the further, the sects that have made it bureaucratic and capitalistic have then formed the thing where it's like, if you don't go every Sunday, or if you don't go these days and you don't do these things, then you're no longer like hierarchically pious. But the origin and the religion of Hinduism has never, like, I mean, it's like literally even in the scriptures, like that's the way it reads, right? But then it's just the interpretation and continued interpretation. So it's like, we were having that conversation. I'm like, it's not like, what's the word? It's, you can be spiritual and religious, but you don't have to be, you can be spiritual and non-religious too, right?
Yes.
religion has spirituality in some form baked in. But it's like so fascinating to just think about that aspect. And I wanted to make one other comment about love, which you have shifted for me, because I love, as you do too, and so does Maggie, like, the human experience, the human condition, and the human psyche. Like that is to me is a very fascinating. Like I'm always trying to think, why did this person do that way? Because it's like probably informed by, and or what societally is informing the way that they're moving through, and so that's just my own very, like, I'm intrigued. I'm always thinking in that way. I'm always like in that zone. And sometimes I need to be pulled out and be more present as you have represented. But with the aspect in the study of that, I love to hear the stories of people who just sort of were themselves. And I was equating that very much, I realized, to that courage piece. But today I am looking at it through a new lens, and I'm looking at it through the lens of like, they were just love. And so the fear was eliminated because they were just love. So I'm thinking about the stories of like people who went and asked for things that were beyond, society authoritative, like beyond their reach, or, that person who like talked to whoever, I mean, insert whatever, like named figure, influential. And they just said like, they had a conversation. I'm thinking, I always am curious about that because I'm like, what in them drives them to like just show up, even though, society paints a power complex or an authority complex, and they're just like, just show up and have it. And I'm like, it's not necessarily courage, it's love. Like they were just like, I'm moving through the world as a being of love. So how is it going to hurt if I have this conversation or if I ask for this thing?
I'm going to tell you this. Deja, Deja, Replenish Deja. She said to me the other month, she said, you are love. Like you are the embodiment of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly and always just want people to experience that, whether short term or long term. I would just hope that that you're deserving. You should know what unconditional love looks like, and it's not transactional. And you should know that you're valued, seen, and all those things. So, yeah.
That's how I would describe liberation as well. As liberation is just to remember that you are love, right? And so it's really beautiful. And thank you. So we're already at like an hour. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, y'all.
We do have one closing question because we could ask you a million more questions, but our closer is, what are you noticing today?
What am I noticing today? I'm noticing there is a group of individuals that recognize there is a need to do more, that we can do more, and that we will be able to help support each other in this next phase of what the world is going to look like.
Hopeful and inspiring.
Yes. I'm sure, thank you. And I'm sure like people are absolutely going to want to connect with you, Krystopher, whether you want that or not. We'll try to, figure out how to support you and make sure you are, upheld in that way. But how, if any way that you want to share here, can people connect with you?
I'm on Instagram. I believe it's Krystopher Nasir. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So one of the other is a good way to connect with me.
I love that. And that will also be in the notes. So definitely find Krystopher. Let's show Krystopher love too, because the embodiment of love requires, to be noticed as well. So thank you for all of the love that you have just cast onto all of us and let move through you.
Thank you.
We're so excited. Thank you. Thanks for listening.